Okay, we're going back to just plain old Squeak for a little bit. I'm going to create a new project, a new morphic project. That just basically creates a blank work area. You can go back to the old one, jump to project, jump to that project. Now I'm going to change the size of my fonts by going to the Preferences browser, searching for font, and enabling Big Display. Big Display basically just makes all the fonts bigger so they're easier to look at. So now we drag out a transcript window, which is now very big, and we shrink it down. We drag out a workspace window and shrink it down. And we're going to be working with the system browser a lot, so we drag that out and shrink it down an awful lot. Let's go from this end. Okay, now let's create a new class and some methods to work with that class. Here is the class package creation window. We're going to create a class named testing. We're going to put it in the class or package category named testing-testing. We're going to save it, and it creates this new package named testing-testing with a new class named testing with no messages. So we're going to create our first message, or method rather. We're going to call it initialize. I'm going to remove extraneous stuff. We're going to save it. Notice it's created a new method that doesn't do anything. And if we created a new class from this method, it too wouldn't do anything. It'd just be an object with no attributes other than just being an object. So let's give it an attribute of a sort. Let's say myArray equals for assignment array new with 5 slots. Now let's save it. And it says, wait a minute, my array isn't defined, so let's make it an instance variable. So the red goes away, and if you look at the instance variables, my array is now officially recognized as an instance variable. So let's make an instance. Let's call it myTest equals testing new, and do it. And if we inspect myTest, we will actually see it's created a new object of type testing with one instance variable, myArray, which we can actually do an inspect on as well. Now, watch what happens here. MyArray is a variable associated with this object of type testing. So, within the inspector panel, I can say myArray at 3, print it, and I get a nil. So let's say myArray at 3, put 17. Do it, and sure enough, a 17 magically appears. And actually, if we look at the inspector panel for array and look at the third slot, it too appears. See? Okay, that's pretty cool. But we can't work with things in a regular program. There are no accessors. You can only work within the inspector panel or within the source code to access these instance variables. So let's create some accessors. We click on the name of the class, right click, bring up the menu, select more, this varies from version to version, and create instance variable accessors. And sure enough, we have one that returns the value of my array and one that sets the value of my array. So now we can go over here to our workspace, which is external code, my test, my array, and print it, or my test, my array at 4, put 22.0 and do it. And sure enough, at 4, my array now contains 22.0. Notice that the object's live and you can start doing things with it. Let's do something more complicated. Let's add 2 numbers in the array. So let's just say, let's start, rename this add first 2. Now we're going to say return results of my, let's make it pretty, my array at 1 plus my array at 2. Save it, and now we're going to do it. Now you may realize there's going to be an error. My array add first 2. When we do it, I'm expecting an error. Why? Because in fact nil is not addable. If we go in here and we go to add first 2, you notice that my array first value is nil, second value is nil, and it doesn't know how to do a plus with nil. So let's modify this. Notice this is the debugger window. So let's start modifying this. Let's do a test. My array at 1 is number. Well, we better put parentheses there because we know darn well that 1 is a number and we aren't sure what's going to happen. Well, let's do it this way. My array 1 is a number. If true, transcript show true. Save it. Unknown selector at if true. So first parentheses we have to put around is there because it's trying to figure out what the heck at if true is, and there's no such message. So we save it again, no errors, and now we do it, and it didn't say anything because it's not a number. Let's try adding an if false clause. Array is true if true, false. This is how you do if else in Smalltalk. Yes, it's clunky, but Smalltalk is so useful otherwise that you live with silly things like this. Now, this time, my test add first 2 and do it. Oh, it's false. Okay. Now, we know that the second one isn't a number either, so we want to have a test for that too. And, colon, my array at 2 is number. I have to know that there's a very strange syntax for Smalltalk. So I'm going to do it this way. notice we need one of these. And in fact, we need one of these. Now this entire expression here is a Boolean that's tested. I happen to know after much trial and error that this is true. If true, then do this. If false, we're actually going to do something different. We're going to say self error can't add two non-numbers. I'm going to save it. Unmatched string quote. Interesting. Self error. Oh. Double quote that to escape it. And now, this time, if we do it, we're going to get error can't add two non-numbers. Okay. So let's make these numbers, or these array variables, true. We'll go to the array inspector and say self at 1, put 2 and do it. There's a number. And self at 2, put 3 and do it. There's two numbers, number 1, number 2. Now we're going to go back to here and hopefully this time add first 2, we're going to print it. One more thing. We've got to add a final parentheses. So this is tested as a Boolean, and this is tested as a Boolean, and this is tested as a Boolean. So now, let's do it again. Prayer, print it. Okay. Let's try this. Print it. Yes! So I suspect that last set of parentheses may not have been proper or required. Let's experiment to make sure. Yes. Now I believe that is syntax that is correct. We returned a number here, tested is it a number, and then did a further test of this number, checking to see if it's a number, and then the entire thing was set to true or false because that's what this test and this test does. So if true, my array at 1 plus my array at 2. If they're both numbers, then return my array at 1 plus my array at 2. So you got to see debugging at its finest in Smalltalk.